Hello everyone, I'm Maitraye from Northwestern University, and today I'm going to talk about our paper on a case analysis of accessible making. In this study, I worked with Katya, Borgos-Rodriguez and Anne-Marie Piper, also from Northwestern University. So I'm going to begin with a story. This is the story of Helen. She is 73 years old and she has been totally blind for the past 33 years. She lives in a residential community for people with vision impairments, where she works in a weaving studio with other visually impaired residents and their sighted instructors. For the past 7 years, Helen has made many different woven products, like tote bags, dish towels, runners, and so on. The image on this slide is from the last time I met her, when she was working on a tote bag with black and blue yarns. She was planning to work on a red-colored bag next, which she would give to her niece, since that was her favorite color. Helen is a visually impaired maker who enjoys working in this community weaving studio and making woven products that she can sell and give to her closed ones. Now, where does Helen's story fit in with the emerging maker culture that has traditionally highlighted experiences of makers who are younger, able-bodied, well-educated, and affluent? Although maker culture has been praised for democratizing design work, scholars have also questioned whether it is truly democratic and inclusive, and who gets recognized as a maker and designer. As you see, certain communities, particularly those who do manual, non-technical handwork as Helen does, have been traditionally under-recognized in design. Also, many design stories tend to position able-bodied people as designers and disabled people as non-designers. As part of this discourse, accessibility and assistive technology scholars have also started talking about how to make making accessible. Researchers suggested that the design of physical workspace and software and hardware tools should be improved to support people with disabilities in making. At the same time, researchers have also emphasized that making activities can foster creative expression, independence, and empowerment among people with disabilities. Much of this work focuses on supporting individuals with disabilities in making. However, we still don't know much about community aspects of accessible making. So in this work, we investigate how accessible maker communities are created and sustained, and how material workspace and community members shape accessible making. With that goal in mind, we focused on a specific context of study, a community weaving studio for people with vision impairments. In this community, visually impaired weavers like Helen are empowered as designers, and they, along with their sighted instructors, come up with their own practices around accessible making. This slide shows an image from the weaving studio where Helen was working with a sighted instructor. Now, why did we focus on weaving? Weaving is a traditional and manual form of making, but it is also a very complex practice that can take years to master. It involves a form of algorithmic thinking. Weavers need to systematically interlace threads and follow numerical sequences of patterns. The image on this slide shows a loom with a work in progress. So to understand accessible making, we conducted fieldwork with approval from the community. We conducted participant observation at the community weaving studio for 8 months. We observed 30 weaving sessions in total and video recorded 8 of those. To supplement our observation data, we also conducted semi-structured interviews with 11 visually impaired weavers and 3 sighted instructors at the studio. We also interviewed a blind weaver and instructor at another community. We collected and analyzed data following ethnographic field research method. Additionally, we performed iterative coding and constant comparison between data to data and data to emerging concepts and theories following constructivist grounded theory method. Throughout the process of data collection and analysis, we considered interaction as multimodal, embodied, and situated. We attended to how participants combine different modalities to establish a shared meaning. Additionally, we follow Kafer's political relational model of disability and work from other feminist disability scholars. We view disability as enacted through particular socio-material configurations rather than located solely in the individual or society. So moving on to our findings now. Our analysis identified 3 key aspects of weaving as an instance of accessible making. Specifically, we found that accessible making involves attending to interactive properties of materials, collaboratively creating and negotiating accessibility in making, and valuing the labor of making. We see that for weavers with vision impairments, the feel of different yarns, based on their texture, thickness, composition, elasticity, and other attributes is a particularly important interactive property. For instance, the image here shows a weaver, Amy, working on a multi-shaded blue pattern with 2 shuttles. During the interview, she traced her fingertips along the woven pattern and explained, "It's called summer-winter, and it's sort of like the opposite of each other. See the difference in the texture, and you can feel the diagonals and how they go with your fingertips." So the tactile feel of textured fibers coming together into a pattern gives a piece its meaning and also signifies which work is one's own. Another important and unique practice in weaving is continuously sensing and creating tension on the threads. The image on this slide shows a weaver pressing on the threads on a loom with their hand to assess the tension. Weavers do this frequently to check if the threads are under appropriate tension or not, or if they are getting tangled somewhere. One weaver described a scenario. He said, "Let's say I put this shuttle through over here and I have tangled the thread. When I get ready to do the other weave, this thread will pull tight, and that means something up here has been done wrong. This thing will let you know. That is, the shuttle and the thread will tug back to the weaver and alert him of a possible mistake." Beyond texture and tension, weavers also attend to the ways materials collide with each other and with their body during the process of weaving. As an example, I'm playing a video capture where weaver Paul is pulling the beater. As the beater collides against the woven cloth, it makes a distinct beating sound and marks the end of a weaving cycle. This process is repeated over and over again, and Paul described this as a rhythm I have to follow. It's sort of like music. So we see that instead of visually following the beater, shuttle, and other loom components, blind weavers engage in a reflective conversation with the materials, where materials talk back to the weavers through interactive properties such as tension, texture, and collision. While these material properties are important to all weavers, they play a particularly salient role in the way blind weavers use their non-visual senses to understand system state, potential mistakes, and how the product takes shape through their actions. Also, while making has been typically conceived of as an individual and independent activity, our analysis revealed that weavers and instructors at the weaving studio collaboratively create an accessible space for weaving. When a weaver starts learning, instructors provide hand-over-hand guidance, as shown in the image on this slide. They do this because sometimes their words alone are not sufficient to demonstrate certain actions. For example, to teach the concept of beading, instructor Laura asks a weaver to place their hand over her hand, and then she replicates the movement of the beater. This way, weavers get the reverb effect. They get the feel, the rate, the speed, the emphasis. So weavers learn the step of beading as they experience the sounds and the embodied feel of pulling the beater following instructors' hand-over-hand guidance. Again, when weavers face difficulties in navigating their workspaces, instructors make adaptations according to their individual needs and abilities. For example, the weaver in this image has started a new project, and she was facing difficulties in remembering the weaving sequence. Since she had some residual vision, instructors wrote down the weaving sequence in large font and attached it to the loom. Importantly, these kind of adaptations are designed collaboratively. As one instructor explained, "I will ask the weaver themselves, what would be helpful, this or this? And they will then make their decision." A lot of it is collaboration in doing. Most of it is, in fact. So we see that instructors try to ensure that weavers have agency in securing assistance, rather than being passive recipients of support. Still, there are instances where certain tasks become tedious or distracting for a weaver. In such cases, instead of doing the work for the weaver, instructors engage in a co-weaving approach, where both of them synchronously perform different parts of the task. As the image on this slide shows, an instructor and a weaver were performing unweaving together to fix mistakes. So we see that instructors listen to what weavers want and make sure that weavers' contributions are highlighted in the weaving process. As one instructor, Sarah, explained, "I like to be viewed as more of a tool than maybe an instructor or even a helper. What my goal, I think, is with the people that aren't already there, bring them to the point of more individuality and more sort of taking the reins, and then for me to be just there to assist in the things that either they are more interested in or need help with." Our analysis also revealed that accessible making is about how the labor of making is valued. Weavers in this community explained that weaving was a fun and relaxing experience for them, and it motivated them to get back to work after loss and heal. Also, they explained that the value of making comes from both the process and the product of their labor. As Jane explained, I enjoy seeing how the product comes into being, and that I can make something that I can use or somebody else could use. Weavers also find value in being able to gift their products to others who are in need. Bill said, "It just gives me a good feeling inside, knowing that hopefully I helped someone, like I have brightened someone's day." In addition to gifting, weavers also sell their products. Many of the weavers in this facility live on limited income, and they also have multiple chronic conditions for which they cannot engage in other forms of employment. So receiving profits from a sold product is an important source of income for them. Adam even explained that for him, the best part of weaving is making the money. Also, the staff at the residential facility display these woven products in the common spaces and arrange public exhibitions in the downtown area of the city. The image on this slide shows a product display kept near the front desk of the facility. Weavers described how these kinds of public display can lead to broader societal recognition of their abilities and existence as a community. Emma said, "It definitely would bring a lot of publicity for this type of facility. Our names will be up there. It will help communicate to people that we are not throwaways. We are not just helpless. We have something to offer." So what do these findings mean for future research in disability and making? Prior work has examined materiality in design and making for a long time. However, the role of materiality in making among people with disabilities has not been explored much. In our analysis, we saw that weavers communicate with the materials in their workspace by attending to their interactive properties using their non-visual senses. This prompts us to envision new types of tangible and hybrid systems such as spin or luminary, but specifically focusing on accessible making. For example, we can think about augmenting looms to enhance the embodied rhythm of weaving. Texture, tension, collision, colors, all these could be represented through sonification or haptic signals. Also, prior work has primarily focused on improving tools and workspaces such that people with disabilities can perform making independently without assistance from others. In contrast, we found that blind weavers and sighted instructors co-create accessibility in the weaving studio, something that we also find in other work on accessibility diverse collaboration in professional and home spaces. However, these co-creative practices between blind weavers and sighted instructors were not centered around any assistance-based support. Instead, weavers had agency in determining what support they need and how. So this prompts us to rethink the design of accessible maker technologies that can move away from assuming that support is always needed or wanted. Instead, they can highlight disabled makers' contributions and labor by fading into the background. Also, instead of considering independence from able-bodied collaborators as the ideal design goal, technologies may support interdependent co-creative practices between ability-diverse collaborators. And following other disability studies scholars, in this work, we try to broaden our understanding of who are recognized as makers and designers. However, as Bennett, Hale, and Rosner cautioned, by framing blind weavers' making activities as meaningful and empowering, we may miss the fact that weavers need to engage in this labor because of their social position, their limited options for employment, and financial constraints. So as we discuss accessible making, we should not only emphasize on the empowering aspects of making, we should also keep in mind the social, political, and structural factors that make this labor necessary for people with disabilities. Also, since ableist views have traditionally framed design and making as exceptional for people with disabilities, we question whether the resulting products are valued on their own merits or because those are created by disabled makers. As we are talking about accessible making, we should keep in mind whether this kind of valuation of disabled labor could reinforce any stigma and ableist views. So to summarize, we studied a specific instance of accessible making by observing a community of weavers with vision impairments. We found that accessible making requires attending to interactive properties of materials, and it is co-created through negotiation of assistance and ownership between disabled makers and their able-bodied collaborators. Also, we argue that accessible making is inherently political in the sense that it confronts tensions between recognition of disabled makers as contributing members of the society and how their labor is valued by others and by themselves. Thank you all for listening. You can reach out to me by email if you want to chat more about this work.